Nephi applied the scientific method to his writings, detailing a testable, repeatable, and observable process for gaining revelation. He exercised this process again and again over his entire life, preserving the formulas in his books, adding quotes from others who had applied the same tests and gotten the same results. For him, revelation was a fact so real that he staked his life on it several times. Through this process, he gained a great knowledge of the goodness and the mysteries of God. His goal was for us to accept and apply this process in our lives so we can experience similar results. How can we do that? Let's take a look. I want to be clear. You will never find a God through worldly means. Certainly, the scientific method can point to evidence, but you will never discover God in any microscope or telescope, or by appealing only to logic or philosophy. Over-reliance on worldly methods to certify spiritual truths will end in frustration. Why? Because God values free will. He wants us to surpass the seductive and sometimes deceptive search for mere facts and live by faith. In so doing, we can become rather than just accept. While anyone can read a passage declaring that 1 + 1 = 2, not until they willingly immerse themselves in the mathematic disciplines will they see that formula's complexity, beauty, and universal power. Similarly, having God show himself to everyone at their whim will not unveil to us the power and beauty of discovering him ourselves, allowing us to gain confidence in him and ourselves through experience. That way, we gradually, naturally take upon us his attributes, discovering not only who he is, but why. We can turn passive acceptance of his ways into living, willing, earnest, and even sacrificing emulation, harvesting the joys that line that path. Therefore, it is perfectly appropriate for Nephi to use the phrase great knowledge. Great can mean wonderful, as in, I know something, isn't that great? It can also mean broad, as in having a knowledge of several things. But I like to think that Nephi centered the word here on capacity, highlighting that he knew God in depth. Why would he say that? To help us develop our own testimonies by relying on the rock and power of his. It piques our curiosity. Nephi knew this stuff. How can I? For Nephi to have great knowledge of God, he must have known his subject intimately. Like any scholar, he would have studied his writings and anything written about him, talked with people who knew him, visited his hometown, maybe learned his language, and ate the same kind of food. Ideally, he would have known him personally, heard his voice, learned his mannerisms, asked him questions, and analyzed his responses. He would have spent time with him, watched his responses, and then stood back to see how history judged him. That process could have even led the scholar to become a bit like him. Nephi did these things. This is where the phrase great knowledge has power. Knowledge of what? Of whom? Of God, of his goodness and mysteries. Note that Nephi uses the word knowledge, not faith or belief or even maybe. He fulfilled those by knowing. This book contains facts and truth, builds faith, and shows us how to apply these concepts in our own lives. As such, it is a conduit for revelation from the source of all truth itself. Truth is a knowledge of things as they are, as they were, and as they are to come. It is experience added to example, added to study. It is real, lifelong, eternal learning and real, sustaining joy. This is the very definition of eternity. This book's truths apply as surely now as they did when the book was written, even though we live in wildly different times. The same is true for Nephi's promise that you can gain knowledge as he did, by study, by personal experience, and by gaining direct instruction from God through the Spirit and in your prayers. Next time, we will look at one of Nephi's most wonderful discoveries: God's goodness.